In this video, we're going to redo the 1AR, 2NR, and 2AR from TOC Quarterfinals 2015 between Adam Tomasi and David Branse. Unfortunately, the video we made on the entire round with our feedback and commentary got corrupted, and so I'm going to request that you go flow the debate and then take down these following notes and practice the redos the way that Kirk has practiced them and see if you can give something of a similar quality and then compare the results and incorporate my feedback. So in that round, the first thing that we discussed is that it may not have been the best decision for Adam to willingly step into the nib that he stepped into in the 1AR. He had a couple of options here. The A point was he could have gone for the comparative world stuff at the bottom of the AF via the Nielsen analysis. The one end was not very good on that debate. It was decent. It gave itself some ammunition, but not nearly as much as it could have. It also seemed to have pretty much conceded that it violated comparative worlds by giving a counter interpretation. So that could have been a pretty easy way out for Adam, I think. The danger here again was that the 1AC had specified RVIs, so we had a long conversation in the now corrupted video about the danger of 1AC theory spikes, because now if Adam reads theory in the 1AR, it is a game over issue for him potentially should the 2NR go for 6 minutes of theory, because the 2NR gets access to an RVI since the 1AC's iteration of it was bidirectional. Regardless, though, we think it's a good idea if Adam wins the comparative worlds versus truth testing debate, because that's a very winnable debate, and I think even if the 2N gets access to an RVI there, that at the very least collapses the debate down to theory, and Adam is probably on the right side of this theory debate. The second thing we discuss in this round is that this round is a classic example of going for too much, both from the perspective of the 2NR and from the perspective of the 2AR. Me, Parker, and Kirk think that the 2NR really screwed up by not giving more lip service to Adam's arguments on the NC case proper. He had a turn about bargaining power, he had a non-unique about the minimum wage, and he had link defense saying that people can just, get rid of their paychecks. I think that the 2NR really left the door open for the 2AR to beat back the nib and then just collapse back to the NC. And the 2NR should not have done that. So the time that the 2NR spent at the end of its speech going for the Enoch stuff and going for the answers to util via the AT practicality arguments and going for the turn about employer culpability is time wasted in an essence, because what could have been much better spent on the NC. If you're going to invest 3 minutes on the NC, you need to make sure you're conclusively winning the NC, because a smart 2AR will collapse onto it, especially if it has offense. At the very least, you definitely want to make sure there's no conceded defense or offense on your contention. So we thought that David's 2NR was remarkably good in terms of being responsive to the 1AR, but it dropped the ball in one place and one place only, which was the NC offense, and that is not ideal, because he was very good on the framework debate of the NCAC. He was very good on the nib, and he was also very good on the util indites, as well as being very good on the Enoch debate. And by good, we mean that he was technical, he was directly responsive to Adam's arguments, and he was very comparative. However, he didn't do this for case offense on the NC, which is really problematic. Unfortunately, the third thing we should definitely learn from this round is that Adam didn't capitalize on the 2NR's misallocation of time. Instead of collapsing down to the NC, Adam went for everything. And so if you listen to that 2AR, it was by far, I think, the poorest speech that Adam has given in a while, because the 2AR just didn't really get time to address the nib. It only got there at the end of the 2AR with 10-15 seconds left, and it wasn't very persuasive on that debate. It also didn't really get time on the Enoch debate, which was game over for the AF. And so the 2AR essentially willingly stepped into the scenario where it had to win everything. And I don't know why the 2AR would ever do that. Don't put your 2AR in a situation where if you're going to win the debate, you have to fight through the framework, you have to fight through a case turn via the Enoch argument, you have to fight through a framework indite via the util indites, and you have to fight through the turn about employer culpability, and this is all after dealing with the nib. So basically you set your 2AR into a position where it has to win 5 different layers in order for it to win the round. Compare all of that to a world where Adam just beat the nib and then collapsed to the NC. He would have only had to win 2 different layers to win the round. And that makes his 2AR much more manageable in terms of time allocation. We also think that Adam in the 2AR, the fourth big learning lesson here should be, do not extend through ink. A lot of the 2AR was just extending arguments that had ink on them from the 2NR and not addressing the ink. If you extend through ink, you will not win debate rounds. It will just not work out in your favor because a good judge will recognize that the 2NR was responsive and the 2AR didn't respond to the 2NR's responses. The biggest advantage to being AF is you get to have the last word on things. Make sure you have the last word. Make sure you give lip service to the arguments that the 2NR is making on the line by line. Do not drop them the way that Adam did. And I think the fifth big lesson here is that perceptual dominance was crucial for that 2AR, especially on answering the NC case. Like, the 2NR really could have turned this debate around for itself. 2AR could have really turned this debate around for itself by making a ton of arguments for why, look, I'm getting wrecked on the framework debate, but too bad for him, he's dropping a couple of very simple arguments on the case of the NC, which means that it's going to be an easy ballot for the AF if I get rid of the nib. And so the last lesson here I think that should be learned is that the order of the 2AR needs to deal with the nib first, not last. If there is a layer that needs to be resolved before you can access your offense, do not resolve that layer at the end of your 2AR. Resolve it at the beginning of your 2AR, because none of the debate matters if that doesn't get resolved. Everything else you did in the 2AR is functionally useless if you're not beating back the nib. So start at the layer that you have to beat in order to get access to your offense. In an ideal world, there is no layer like that. Like, in an ideal world, there is not one layer that your opponent can win off of, but you can't win off of, right? Ideally, you're getting reciprocal offense off that layer that your opponent can win off of. But if for some reason you're not in that ideal world, i.e. you decided to just respond to a theory shell and go for substance, deal with the theory shell first, or deal with the nib first, or deal with the a priori first. Do not deal with it last, because what happens is that you can misallocate time the way Adam did here and not get to it, and at the very end, when you get to it, you only have time to extend an argument as opposed to respond directly to all the arguments the 2NR made. So, we're going to listen to 3 redos. The first redo you should do is of the 1AR, where it goes for the comparative worlds truth testing debate for about 90 seconds. The goal is to construct an interrupt and a violation and conclusively win the standards debate in 90 seconds, so that way you still have time to answer the nib and time to turn the NC. That way, come the 2AR, you have numerous ways out of the round. Should the 2NR not handle, or should the 2NR handle the theory debate well, but for some reason not really do the RVI debate the way it could be.
Wait, but I don't understand the purpose of only going in for 90 seconds, especially when the 2N can just collapse on a theory shot and sit on it for 6 minutes, right?
That's a good question. So Kirk is saying, why would we ever do this in a world where we read RVIs in the app? The point is that as a drill, you should be able to do this presuming you didn't read RVIs in the app. And in that world, you can go for this for 90 seconds, but then you want to give yourself a substantive out as well. And the fastest substantive out would be beat the nib and then turn the NC. So, yeah, in a real round, i.e. this real round, you would never do this. If you were going to go for theory, you'd go for 4 minutes of it in the 1AR, because you've conceded the RVI. And you've conceded it by actually making it. So you don't have any recourse there. However, so in a different debate round where you have not read RVIs, this debate could be very relevant. So that's why we're going to practice it. So that's the first redo I'd like you to do at home. The second redo I'd like you to do is the 2NR with better time allocation on the NC case proper. So we're going to just practice the responses to the NC case proper and ideally get them in 2 minutes. So that way you still have 2 to 2.5 minutes to win the NC framework, and then you still have 1.5 minutes for the nib. And that gives the neg 2 easy ways out of the round and 2 conclusive ways out of the round, because the AF is really just very far behind on the framework debate here. And so We're going to conclusively see if we can win the NC case in less than 2 minutes and deal with all of Adam's turns. And then the last speech I would like you to practice at home is the 2AR where you collapse to the NC for 2 minutes. And so in that 2AR, ideally after a minute in that speech, you've gotten rid of the nib or at least made it muddled enough that your judges won't feel comfortable voting on it. And you go to the NC, and now you can just perceptually wreck the negative on the NC. So we're going to listen to the 2AR to see if it can do that. So let's listen to the 1AR, Kirk.
Wait, I think there was one more thing that you forgot to mention. Was the Adam's cross-examination. That Adam went for too much in his DM.
Right. Good point, Kirk. So Kirk just pointed out that in the corrupted video, we also had a long conversation about the difference in cross-sex between David and Adam. If you go back and listen to it, the cross-examination between David and Adam was interesting because David only went for 2 things. David really narrowed down his cross-examination to figuring out how the specification of the AF works and how you turn the AF when it doesn't specify, and to push Adam on the framework debate a little bit. Compare that to what Adam did. Adam asked at least 4 or 5 different layers worth of questions that he was interested in. And in that process, he didn't really get much out of any of it. So one drill that I would also recommend doing is typing out Adam's cross-sex against David and writing up follow-up questions that Adam could have asked David to really force David to point out contradictions in his NC strategy or his framework. And there are several examples of this. What we'll do is we'll upload Kirk's homework assignment so you can get a better idea of how this drill would look like, and you can practice something similar. So yeah, if there is nothing else, I would recommend definitely practicing all 3 of those speeches and then watching part 2 of this video series to see how your speeches compare to Kirk's.
Yeah.
One second, I'm going to stop.